Once you've squared out your part, you can go back to the layout area and finish drawing your dimensions or scribing your dimensions onto your part. In this certification, we're only going to use these as visual cues for ourselves. Our actual dimensions and measurements are going to come from the machine itself. I'll get into it in a little bit, but on all the different axes you can see dials, and the dials have markings on them. They're hundredths or 200 thousandths of an inch. On the z-axis, it's going to be split up into, there's 100 thousandths, and on the x and y axes, there's 200 thousandths on each dial. So we're going to be looking at this part, and I've measured it beforehand, and the part is 141.413, and the overall dimension that we're trying to bring it down to is 1.250. So that means we have to get rid of 181 thousandths. It's often useful to have a piece of paper with you so you can scratch down some numbers on it instead of trying to keep them all in your head. So I'm going to put my part in here, and I'm going to lock it down. And we're going to want to zero out our tool so that we know where we're going from. So if you kind of look down here, we've got our increments, and we're going to bring the table up to the tool. We can kind of spin this tool until we see it just hit the part. When we get to that part, we know that's going to be our zero. So right here, our tools kind of hit a spot. So we're going to zero this out now. And you can kind of unloosen this right here and put that on zero. Okay, now we know that's our zero. We're going to back it off a little bit. And now we're going to turn on our machine. Once we turn on our machine, we're going to do these cuts in a couple different passes, both in the X and Y direction, and then we're going to bring it up a little bit more. I think it's going to take me about 4 or 5 passes to get all 181 thousandths. You don't want to take off too much material because you'll really wear through your tool and it won't give you a nice finish. It's important to know that you want to overlap your cuts a little bit. That way you make sure that you get rid of all your material. So I've got this zeroed out, and I am going to bring it in about 20 thousandths and begin cutting. As you can see, my cuts are slightly overlapping, and I'm trying to keep a nice even feed. It's important that when you're cutting to make sure that you come completely off of the surface before you change direction. Our part should now be in its proper overall dimension. You just want to unclamp it, clean it off, and then just verify. Now the methods that I showed you in this are just the different types of ways you could use your end mill. You don't have to cut them in the exact order or the exact way that I cut them. If you would prefer doing this dimension by using the bottom of your cutting tool, that's completely fine. This is up to you. You just have to make sure that your part is in the right specs when you're all done with it.
Now we're going to start working on the second part of your tap guide, which is the cylindrical part. You'll be using primarily the lathe to machine this part. So there are 2 main types of operations whenever you're using a lathe, and those are facing and turning. Facing reduces the overall length of the part, while turning reduces the overall diameter. The first thing you're going to do whenever you start working on this is choose a cutting tool. Now, choosing a cutting tool takes a little bit of practice, so we'll leave the details up to your supervisor to give to you whenever you start getting your blue certification. But just so you know, the cutting tools are found in the machine tools drawer of the layout cabinet. So we're going to start by reducing the overall length of the part to the proper dimension. And as I said before, we're going to be facing this in order to do that. So the first thing you're going to do is put your cutting tool into the tool holder. Now, choosing your cutting edge is going to be something that your supervisor will go over with you, but we've already done that here. Then you'll lock down the tool holder like this. After that, you'll put your part into the chuck, and then you'll lock it down with this tool. Make sure it's really tight, and also make sure that you remove this before you continue. Now there are a couple of fine adjustments that we're going to make before we start actually facing the part, such as lining up the cutting edge with the diameter of the part and making sure that you have the proper angle, but those are some details that your supervisor are going to go over with you. So after you've lined up everything and made sure that your cutting edge is set up properly and double and triple check that everything is fastened, you can turn on your machine. Now we use the forward direction here, so you want to make sure that the spindle is always spinning towards you. What you'll do first is come in and touch your cutting edge up to the face of your part, just so it's barely touching it. Then you'll back off the cross slide, and we recommend taking off about 8 to 12 thousandths of an inch at a time, so you can move this axis in about 10 thousandths of an inch. Will be okay. Once you've done that, you can turn on the machine, and you'll move the cross slide inward only halfway across the diameter because the part is turning. And that's how you face a part. Now we're going to start turning the part, which is reducing the part's diameter to the dimension specified on the drawing. We've already reoriented the cutting tool, and this is something that your supervisor will go over with you when you're doing your blue certification. But the idea is that you're dragging the cutting tool along the outer surface of the part so that it reduces the overall diameter as the part spins. We still want to keep the spindle spinning towards you, and then you will begin to cut the part. You'll have to repeat this several times, several passes, in order to get to the proper dimension. But one of the main things to pay attention to, especially on your final pass, is the speed and feed of your cutting tool. You just want to make sure that you're going pretty slowly and with a consistent speed so that you get a nice smooth finish at the end. So something really important to remember when you're turning on the lathe is that whatever diameter you need to reduce the part to, you only move your cross slide in half of that amount because the part is turning both sides down as it's being cut. So don't forget that. Now when your part is finished on the lathe, it should look something like this. The remainder of your certification is going to be completed using skills you've already learned in your green certification. You're going to be doing several plunge cuts into both of your parts. So to do this, you're going to use a drill chuck and a drill bit. You'll insert the drill chuck into the vertical end mill, and then insert a drill bit into the drill chuck and secure it. Make sure that when you're drilling into metal, you use machine oil to make sure that your part or the cutting tool does not overheat and break. One thing to note is that when you're doing the through cut on your cylindrical part, is to make sure that your center of the hole is aligned based on the actual diameter of your part. Though the part should be turned down to the specifications indicated on the drawing and within those tolerances, your hole will be misaligned if you try and make the hole centered based on what the drawing says rather than the actual diameter of your part. Aside from the through holes that you'll be cutting, you'll also have to tap a hole on your tap guide. Now, all of the principles that you learned in the green certification in terms of tapping will also hold true on the blue certification. But you'll also want to use thread cutting oil to make sure that the tap and your part does not overheat and that you get a nice clean thread inside of your part. If you have any more questions about the blue certifications, make sure that you're communicating with your supervisors, and we'll be more than happy to answer any types of questions or concerns that you may have. This concludes the Blue certification video. If you have any more questions, make sure that you communicate with your supervisor throughout this certification. As you're completing your certification, be sure to keep in mind the 3 core shop principles of safety, number 1, communication, and housekeeping. Thanks for watching the video, and good luck on your certifications.